Oh shit, that one's out of place. Hang on.
Welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects. This is a podcast where we discuss directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. Today, we're dipping our toes back into that quirky, wacky world of the Coen Brothers. I'm your host, Cody House. With me, he's only voiced today, but that's fine, is our social media content manager, Chris Jacobs.
This is the voice of God.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because when we get talking about this movie, it's basically what Deus Ex Machina means actually happens in this movie. And and we have a returning guest. We have Kevin Pauly back on the show. We're going to see if we end up rivaling how long we talked about Blade Runner, but I don't think we'll get quite.
I don't think we'll get to that level, but that's not to say that there's not some wonderful things to talk about with this movie. I genuinely think the Hudsucker Proxy is one of the most underrated Coen Brothers films, and I'm glad that it's getting a little love here today.
You know what? It was my first time watching it last night. We watched it last night, and I have to say I really enjoyed that, and I can't believe I hadn't seen it by now. And I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way, but it felt very Terry Gilliam to me.
Yes, it has Brazil
absolutely
all over it. Yeah, I'm with you. And I love Brazil. It's my favorite Gilliam film. So it definitely, when you look at the mailroom in particular, that set looks straight out of the Ministry of Information. Like it looks straight out of that set, man. It really does.
As soon as it started, I was like, wait a minute, let me double check this. And I was like, is this a Terry Gilliam movie?
It has that vibe, and it has the anti-capitalist vibe of Brazil as well. So yeah, man, these two films could be like Hudsucker Proxy could be the prequel to Brazil.
Yep.
Right.
This is where society was before we got to where Brazil is.
Exactly. That's it. That's it right there.
Before we get too heavy into the movie and asking questions, Chris, I think, and me and Kevin were talking about this before we recorded, I think a big part of why this movie gets kind of lost in the shuffle, besides that it was not financially a success and it was kind of mixed critically too, was that it's wedged between two foundational films for the Coens. So like this is after Barton Fink, because that's kind of where they get anointed, winning Con, and all the critics and other filmmakers are like, yes, you guys are great filmmakers. We're excited to see whatever you do. And then they do Fargo, which is one of their most critically successful, and I don't know how well it did financially. I guess it did pretty well. It didn't cost a lot, but it's one of those movies that's in the pop culture lexicon forever. So I think that's part of the reason why this one kind of is like, oh, it's that one they did.
Yeah, and it is. I think not only that, but the fact that it does feel very Terry Gilliam is. I kind of wonder if people understood it, or if they fully grasp it. Because when you look at Fargo and like their other movies, they're a little more grounded.
Sure.
If that makes sense, like they're not as. Man, I don't know how else to put this other than it just being very Terry Gilliam. Like it's very odd. It's very whimsical, and I can kind of see where people may not have fully understood it. You know, maybe it didn't.
We were talking before. I think one of the interesting thing about this particular year here is Tim Robbins gets to star in two movies in the same year. Both of them have the unfortunate thing of having two of the worst titles to put on a box office marquee, and that's The Shawshank Redemption and The Hudsucker Proxy. Those titles don't tell you anything about the movies. They're just weird, and like most people would see a marquee and not even think about those two movies because what the hell do they even mean? Let's not also forget that 1994 is a massive year for film because you have, Forrest Gump, The Lion King, Pulp Fiction. Four Weddings and a Funeral was a big hit and Academy Award nominated. Quiz Show. I mean, it was a big year for films. And this one, I just feel like got kind of lost in the shuffle because it was a weird time in the early to mid 90s is when like it felt like people were getting more serious about their cinema. Like films had to, it was almost like getting back to that 70s where they had to have that edge or something there to kind of really bring people in. And the Hudsucker Proxy is not any of that. It's this sweet little homage to like 1940s, like Jimmy Stewart films. And if that film would have been made in the 1940s, Jimmy Stewart would have played Norval. There's no question at all.
Right.
It's that kind of vibe. And it's such a sweet movie. It's weird and quirky. It's a Coen Brothers film, absolutely. But it's such a sweet film at its core. And it almost feels like, because it was an homage to those films of that time, it almost feels like it was a film of that time in 1994. Like, it's not the kind of movie that people were looking to go see. And let's be honest, it's not the kind of film that people were looking for the Coen Brothers to do, because they were doing these more edgy, weird, like Critical Darling type films that were like kind of, dark and kind of sleazy and kind of, creepy and just odd. And especially looking at Barton Fink, which is all of those things. And then here comes this with its beautiful cinematography and production design and its very quirky and cheerful, take on cinema. And it really doesn't fit in with other films of that year. I think that's a big problem with it. It's just, it wasn't the kind of film that audiences were flocking to as much. In that style. So I think that definitely hurts it.
It did seem like you said, it did seem like a huge, like a 40s, grand movie, even from the beginning of it, with the black and white titles and the
even the font,
music, even the score. Yeah, the font.
Yeah.
I mean, everything just screams, it's set in the 40s, but when you open it,
it's actually set in the 50s. It's set in 1950s.
Yeah.
50s, yeah, I'm sorry. But yeah, when you open it like an older film, to match what the viewer is going to see. I mean, it all flowed really well together.
To me, they had a vision for that film, and you see it from the opening, titles to the end of the film. It's all there, man. And it's got such a, I don't know how it got glossed over at the Academy Awards especially for production design, because man, that film is handsome. It really is. And again, Roger Deakins, just a god behind the lens. The cinematography for that film is stunning. And watching it in HD last night, all I could think of was like, man, this movie looks like it was made today.
That's
just a stunning film, man.
Yeah, we watched it. We watched a clean, again, we got whatever, we hadn't seen it. So I'm getting whatever newest cleaned up version I can find, of course, and that's when we started watching. I was like, wow, this looks really great. This looks really good for an older film.
And the set work and stuff. The sets, Paul Newman's office is like one of my favorite sets in the film, man. Because like you always see that second hand of the clock, and it always looks like the hangman or like the axe coming down, to axe someone. Because usually what happens after we see him in that office is he's firing someone or doing something evil. So like it's just like this neat little thing. And I love the circle motif. Like there's circles all over that film. Even the lights, the camera lenses on, at every one of the press conferences, everything about it. And I will say till the end of time, maybe my single favorite Coen Brothers joke ever. And it's maybe the funniest visual gag I've ever seen in a film. The goddamn blueprints for the hula hoop. Funniest thing. Like when I saw it in the theater, it kind of broke my brain. I was laughing so hard. It's a circle for the side view, and then a straight line and a horizontal line for the vertical and horizontal view of it. And
every time he showed that, I cracked up inside. I was like, oh my
when he's
God.
sitting at his desk, would an idiot come up with something like this and turns around the picture and it's just a circle?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Tim Robbins' delivery of that is perfection. But that blueprint truly is one of the funniest visual gags I will ever see in a film. That's genius level comedy right there, man. It's a circle and two straight lines, and yet it is exactly the side view and the horizontal and vertical view of a hula hoop.
But he always follows it up. But for the kids,
For
you don't
kids.
just look at him like he's even crazier. Like
I quote that all the time. I say that line all the time, and nobody knows where it comes from, and it breaks my heart because for kids is one of the funniest lines. Tim Robbins is perfection in that, and even the poster for the hula hoop, where he even says on the sides of the kid, for kids, like, oh my god, it's great. It's so funny, like. That is so effortlessly funny to me, and it just kills me that it didn't find its audience when it should have, because Tim Robbins is genuinely great in that movie. He is wonderful in that film, and he does such a great job of playing that sort of that sort of hopeless optimistic who's also a little too naive for his own good, and just really plays that well. And the other role that we have to talk about in this movie is Jennifer Jason Leigh as Amy Archer. Man,
oh my God! You know what? She was great. It felt like I was watching His Girl Friday with her performance. It is of that time. You take her; she is Rosalind Russell.
And Katharine Hepburn. She has that Katharine Hepburn tone. I mean, God, man, she is outstanding in that film.
Yeah, that again. We were it's weird because Lindsay and I, we've talked about the transatlantic accent and how most people were brought up with it back then, or a lot of people, and you hear it a lot in movies. But man, she nailed it.
Oh, it's perfect. It is absolutely perfect.
And you know what I was thinking watching it yesterday? I was like, man, if they had made a Superman movie in the early to mid 90s, Jennifer Jason Leigh would have been a great Lois Lane, and John Mahoney would have been a great Perry White.
Dude, John Mahoney, again, this cast for this movie is just top tier. John Mahoney is so wonderful. And, you get, I'm certain because of Sam Raimi being involved, you get Bruce Campbell as a 1950s reporter. And man, does he look great in that time period. Like, dude, he really looks wonderful in that movie.
He's not just a celebrated cameo. Like, he's a legit supporting character in the movie, which is good.
It is. I love that Charles Durning gets some of the top billing, and he literally bookends that film. He is not even in that movie for 5 minutes. But, man, you can't forget the 5 minutes he's in it, because that opening scene, which apparently was shot by Sam Raimi, dear Lord, his just jumping out the window it's so, wow, that comes out of the blue, and it's so funny, but at the same time, it's so beautifully shot when he's falling. Like, the way that they do
he even motions for people. He's like, "Oh, scoot! I don't want to land on you."
Yeah, he's like telling him,
"That's a little arm wave." Like, "Come on, guys, scoot!"
God, it's so funny. I mean, Charles Durning, really, it's so funny that he gets that level of billing, and he really is just, I mean, literal bookend of the film. But boy, again, you can't forget when he's there. Like when he shows up as an angel with his giant wings and stuff, and then like the halo that's like, he's like, it's just a fad. Well, I mean, God, it's great. It's great, man. It's so great. Like, there's just so much going on in that movie, and I just, it's funny just watching it again last night. I'd really forgotten how funny it is, and it's not like knee slapper funny. It's just clever funny. Although the blueprint is knee slapper funny to me. Like that's just brilliant on a level.
I have a question. Go ahead, Cody. I saw you wind up for a.
Okay. So I was gonna circle back to why we think that, why this movie probably wasn't, and I think you hit it, Kevin, because I think with the success of Pulp Fiction, which came out later than when this came out in theaters, but it's the same year. They went to Cannes in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, they both went to Cannes, and it's the film that beat Hudsucker Proxy at Cannes.
Yeah. I think that revival of the independent film, which had been gearing up, like everyone likes to just think Tarantino gave birth to independent film, but the Coens and Spike Lee and Kevin Smith and Tarantino is the same time. Well, Clerks and Pulp Fiction is like the same time, but Spike Lee, Coen Brothers, Jim Jarmusch.
Yes.
Steven Soderbergh, these guys were doing it in the 80s, which really had started in the 70s with Cassavetes.
Absolutely.
But I do think, that like this rise of the independent film in the 90s kind of did give a rebirth of like, oh, maybe we do want serious films that have something to say, because the 80s was very much a product of the blockbuster generation. which we're kind of back in again.
Well, but you got to remember that was still carrying over into the 90s because what was the biggest two films of 1994 were The Lion King and Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
So, you're in that same year as well. But again, the blockbuster mentality was still there. It very much was. And it never
went away. Yeah.
Never went away. But the Hudsucker Proxy doesn't fit in either of those categories. It doesn't fit in, because it was a Coen Brothers film, but it was a Joel Silver production. Remember, this is a Silver picture. So it's too big budget to be independent, and it's a little too independent and it's designed to be a big budget hit. So it doesn't fit in either category. And I think that's what hurts it. Because I went back and watched the trailer because they have it on Amazon, and I was like, how was this movie marketed? Like, why did I want to go see it? And I watched the trailer and I was like, that's a funny trailer. Like, it's a really good trailer. And I'm like, that's what got my butt into the seat. So I don't think it was the marketing, but I do think the name definitely hurts it. We can say that, no, names do matter. And when you see a name like that on a marquee, no one knows what the hell the Hudsucker Proxy, like, what does that even mean? What's a Hudsucker?
So I got a question. You saw it in theaters. Did you know who the Coen Brothers were in 1994?
Yeah, I've always been a film kid. Like, even as an early age kid, I knew who, like, I was picking up on, like, who, like, people like Dean Cundey. Like, I recognized his name as a kid. I started picking up on his movies because all the movies I loved from John Carpenter, Dean Cundey pretty much shot those. And then I started realizing he did Back to the Future. And so I was like that kind of kid. Like, I knew who I listened to the score. I collected film scores as a kid. Like, I'd go to the music store with my parents, and they're like, hey, you want to buy this new album by so-and-so? Like, no, I wanted the Jaws 2 soundtrack that had the new music by John Williams and had the cover that was not the poster, but should have been the poster. So, like, I was that kid. So I knew who the Coen Brothers were because I'd seen Raising Arizona, and I started picking up on them. And then I was able to, like, thanks to Skinamax, I was able to watch Blood Simple, and it was just kind of like finding my way through at that point. And then, so I knew who they were. Now, I wasn't clamoring to see all their movies like I was a total fan of Steven Spielberg, of course, being at the age I was, born in 1975. He was a huge part of my vocabulary of film. So I wasn't like seeking it out because, it's the Coen Brothers, but I knew who they were. I knew I'd liked what they had done, and I liked Tim Robbins, and of course Paul Newman is a god. So it was like, okay. And then I saw that trailer and I was like, that's really funny. And I was like, okay, I kind of want to see what this is about. And the film came out like in the early spring, like I think it was like March or something, maybe, that it came out, or maybe like around this quarter.
I believe that's right. I believe it was released around March.
Yeah. So I think it was one of those movies that I just went to go see just to see something new, see something different. And I really enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was genuinely funny. And I remember like trying to tell my friends to go see it, and they were like, that title, like that sounds like I don't want to see something called that. And it's like, and it doesn't have, like big special effects, and it doesn't have, and I'm like, no, but it's just a really good movie. So it was like, kind of like I was like the lone person in my school who had seen it, it was really funny. But it's like one of those movies that whenever I find people who have seen it, they either like it or love it. I've never met anybody who was like, I don't like the Hudsucker Proxy. If you're a Coen Brothers fan, I can't imagine you not liking the film because it's so completely a Coen Brothers movie. All their tropes are there, man. Like, it's all there. It's just maybe not as edgy or creepy, but it's got everything else you expect from a Coen Brothers film. It's there. The dialogue in particular.
For sure. And I think you did hit a point, like, and I'm glad you brought up Joel Silver too, because I think at the time this movie is very different for both the Coens and Joel Silver, because Joel Silver's known for producing action films at this time. Yep. And this is a screwball comedy kind of. And I read a review where a critic at the time, gave it a bad review because he's like, you should never combine the work of Frank Capra and Preston Sturges meets Fritz Lang. That's just not, they should never meet. And I'm like, why not?
Yeah. Why not? Who are you to say they shouldn't? Screw you, buddy.
Because
blow out his ass.
Yeah.
Well, I wish, and we could probably say this about us in 15 to 20, 30 years from now, but I wish I could take film critics from up into the 20 teens and bring them to the future and be like, maybe you should be easier on these movies that are directed by directors with some vision and stuff, because there's going to be less of these.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it's sad because today the Hudsucker Proxy doesn't get greenlit unless it would be someone like Netflix or Amazon taking a chance on the Coen Brothers. That film doesn't get released in theaters like today. It doesn't. I mean, and that's sad, man. It really is, because that movie, I mean, revisiting the Hudsucker Proxy, I would tell anybody, if you're a Coen Brothers film fan and you don't really remember this movie, or you skipped it over because someone told you it wasn't good, or whatever reason it is, go back and revisit it, because, man, this movie has a lot to offer. It's so charming. And
this is
so
up there
funny.
with Barton Fink for me. Like Barton Fink, Hudsucker, Fargo, they are all like top tier films.
And they all three were like one after the other after the other. That's what's funny about it.
Well,
like they're all right there, you know.
As also, I can only think of like maybe 3 or 4 movies in their filmography that aren't top tier. Like, for the most part, like, it's pretty unbeatable record. And
I left Lebowski out of that because Lebowski is my top tier. Out of the Coen Brothers, to me, it's all about the Lebowski, and I'm such a huge Lebowski fan.
Well, that's fair. But the thing is, it's kind of its own. It's almost like its own genre. Like
it is.
Well,
it's different.
I think the Coens are very much like Tarantino or Wes Anderson. They're almost their own genre, and they are an acquired taste. Like, not everybody's gonna dig what they're doing. Like, you either like it or you're like, nah, it's not for me. But I think this is one of their more conventional movies, though, honestly. Yeah. Like,
if you were to introduce someone to the Coen Brothers, this is a great introduction film, because it's a little more, and quotation fingers, it's a little more normal as far as like a film goes. It's got a beginning, middle, and an end. It's got a cute, charming story. You know, you follow the hero through his adventures, his rises and his falls, and it's a rise back up again. And it's not like dark or creepy like a Barton Fink or Blood Simple, you know, and it's not, like sexual or anything like that. It's not, dealing with like real, crime like Fargo or Miller's Crossing, or it's not anything like that. It's sort of like, it would be a really good introduction film. Just like if you're introducing someone to David Lynch, The Elephant Man or The Straight Story, that's a good choice. Don't start with Eraserhead. Let
no.
So I wouldn't just
started with Eraserhead.
What's funny is I started actually with the Elephant Man, and then it became I was obsessed with all things Blue Velvet. So that's Blue Velvet really for me was where you see Lynch really get to be Lynch outside of Eraserhead.
Billy, I know who this guy named Billy from my shop that I used to know. I still know, but he came in one day and we were talking movies, and he goes, go to, and this is back, like, we weren't far from Hastings in Nacogdoches. So I would go every night, I would close shop, and I would go down to Hastings, and I would pick through their movies and pick things out, get cheap movies. And he goes, when you go to Hastings, pick up Eraserhead. I'm like, okay. So I went that evening and I found that amongst, other things, and I picked it up and I was like, okay, this looks odd. Like I remember the cover. I've seen the cover before.
The picture of Henry, yeah, man.
I have no idea what this is. And I tell you what, it was one of the most.
You still have no idea what it is.
And it's funny when I think about the Coen Brothers, the first movie of theirs I saw obviously was Raising Arizona, and like we were talking before, Raising Arizona is almost like a goddamn Looney Tunes cartoon, like it's so insane, and it's so weird and so out there, and yet by the same token, even as a kid in the 80s, I may not have gotten all the layers of the film, but I sure got it at just a base enjoyment level. And me and my friends talked about the movie all the time. We felt like we were getting away with something watching that film. Like, we shouldn't be allowed to watch this movie, and yet here we are watching it. And we all became a huge fan of that movie. And so then you start seeing their other films, like Blood Simple. man, Blood Simple is a very different film from Raising Arizona. it's really intense.
Right.
God bless Emmett Walsh. Let me just put that out there. But if you had seen those movies and then you saw the Hudsucker Proxy, you'd be like, what the hell is this? Whereas if you saw the Hudsucker Proxy first, and it does have its quirkiness and its weirdness, it might help you be a little more acclimated to watch, Raising Arizona and then, Blood Simple and so on. So I would say, yeah, the Hudsucker Proxy is a weird sort of anomaly as far as like in that it's the Coen Brothers with a budget, really is what it is. It's the Coen Brothers with a budget. That's a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
They were given a budget, so they had like visual effects they've never had before. They were able to really kind of push the boundaries as far as their filmmaking prowess, as far as like getting involved with visual effects. Like again, the scenes where Hudsucker and Norval are falling, like it's amazing like what they had to do to put those scenes together and shoot it, and it looks great. It still looks great, and that movie's almost 20 years old, man, or 30 years old.
Yeah,
it's insane that film looks as good as it does. It allowed them to give Roger Deakins an even bigger, beautiful, more gigantic palette to paint from. They were able to create actual real huge sets at Coralco Studios in North Carolina, and really like again going back to the comparison to Brazil is the movie that you get when you give Terry Gilliam a budget and just get the hell out of his way. And it is the truest Terry Gilliam film ever released, because everything that he wanted, every vision that he had is on that screen. And I feel like the Hudsucker Proxy is kind of like that again, because it allowed them to tell the story that they wanted to tell, but to tell it with so many more visual effects at their disposal to be able to really pull out some really clever trick shots. And that is what makes that film so unique, is that it got the big budget treatment. It's a Coen Brothers film with big budget money, and it's still a Coen Brothers film though. And so that's where I think, again, the Coen Brothers are an acquired taste, and very few of their films have ever been a mainstream film. Really, Fargo is about as close as it's come. Raising Arizona is kind of there. But the
Brother
Where Art, I take that back. Brother Where Art Thou definitely got picked up, but a lot of that was just the soundtrack got really popular.
Yeah.
And it made people want to go see it. But very few of their films would we say has been a mainstream liked or even loved film. I think we can agree on that.
I think True Grit did very well, but that's by name and it's a Western.
Right. But True Grit is a little more, and I'll be honest, now that I think about it, that's a good introduction film for the Coens, because it's a little more mainstream. I love True Grit. It's great. Yeah. I took my dad to see it because he's a huge Western nerd, and he loved it. He was like, man, Jeff Bridges, wow, what a great, and he's great. His
yeah.
But it's a little more of a safer film for a Coen Brothers view, much like Hudsucker Proxy.
Right.
So for me, like Hudsucker is one of those movies I always loved. I just hadn't revisited it in some time. But now we watched it again. I'm like, you know what? This might have to be like New Year's viewing annually.
Yeah, I totally forgot this was a New Year's Eve movie.
I totally forgot that too. And I'm like, you know what? I think I need to kind of put this in my rotation during the holidays, because it's just a fun, charming film. It never feels like it's staying around too long. It never like loses track of what the story is it's telling. God, the cast is to die for. What an amazing
Paul Newman. Look in the exact.
Oh man,
to be a villain is just wonderful. And I'm also going to say this, man. When he's sitting there after his back rub, Paul Newman was still ripped. Like, dude, he got like some six pack going on. I'm like, you know what, Paul Newman? I see you, bro. I see you.
I think Paul Newman's great in this, and I think he has the best transition of an actor, because he was a leading man who was considered one of the sexiest men in Hollywood at his time. And I think when he got to be about in his 50s or 60s, he turned into one of the greatest character actors you could get in a movie. Like
Paul Newman, man. He's still Paul Newman.
Yeah.
He's great.
But he transitioned well, and he was okay to take those supporting roles. He wasn't like, oh, I got to be the lead because I'm Paul Newman. He was like, where's the work? I'll do, if it's a good role, I'll take it.
Well, and watching him in that scene where Norval first comes into his office, where he's talking on the two different phones, like, it is so perfectly Coen Brothers. Like, that moment is so perfectly a Coen Brothers moment. And Paul Newman fits into their style just effortlessly, man. It's such a funny scene where he's like, telling him to get out, and he's like, "No, don't use the window, use the door."
Right? Yeah. So Coen.
There's a fire in his trash can right beside of him, like almost oblivious to it. And Tim Robbins pulling up that damn water cooler.
Yeah.
And Paul
what are you doing?
Two phones just going, man. Like that.
Right.
God, it's such a funny film. It's such a funny movie. And like, I also love, dude, when the suck up on the board decides to jump out the window. And
plexiglass. I had it installed.
The sound of him up against it and that smear down the window. I swear to God, man, that is such a funny moment. Like, I don't know, like, and it's in the trailer. That's I think the moment that really sold me in the trailer was him just and just that slide down. Like, that's how the trailer ended. And I was like, I guarantee that's what got my ass into a seat, because that's just ridiculous. But watching it in context, man, that's a funny moment. Because they shoot it just like the scene where Charles Durning does it. I mean, the camera angles are like the same and everything. Only the execution is not the same at the end. And that's, oh, God. I mean, I just laughed so hard at that. And again, like the supporting cast, man, John Mahoney as the chief, when he's just going off on all of the reporters, like, what does he do? Does he put jam on his toast? Does he not put jam on his toast? Why doesn't he? Like, he's just spitting it out there. And you're right. He's a great Perry White. He'd have been a great Perry White. Yeah,
he's doing that rat-a-tat-tat dialogue too.
Jason Lee are just like speed reading, man. It's nuts how fast that scene is. And they're like, I bet you $5 she talks about her Pulitzer. And it's like, rolls right back in. I'll stake my Pulitzer on it.
Yep.
Man,
you know what?
God, she's so great. That whole cast is so great in that movie. God, everybody's wonderful.
Another movie this reminds me of, because of it set in the business world and the comedy, is one of my all-time favorite movies, and New Year's Eve, is The Apartment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
this definitely
like
has
that
a
would be
vibe. It does. It really does have that kind of vibe. I will totally agree with that. And again, like, if this movie would have been made in the 1940s or 50s, it's a Jimmy Stewart vehicle. Easy.
Oh, totally. So,
easy.
Do you know who Joel Silver wanted for the lead, which I can't even buy?
I had seen a list of names, and now I can't remember who they were.
Joel Silver wanted Tom Cruise. I can't see Tom Cruise. I can't see Tom Cruise playing this naive, aw shucks kind of guy, though.
But I'd like to see him try. Not gonna lie.
I mean, it would be interesting, but I think Tim Robbins is great.
Oh no, Tim Robbins is perfection in that role. Like, he really is. He is the light yin to Andy Dufresne's yang, man. I mean, like, the same.
Right.
Putting both of those roles out, and it's like they both look identical, but it's like, this is what happens if Andy Dufresne had a happy life, and this is what happens if he's Andy Dufresne. So it's like, you get two different vibes there. But no, the thing is, like, I get where he was coming from on the Tom Cruise, because he needed a star,
right?
And he's thinking about that from a box office standpoint. And I do wonder if Tim Robbins is not the lead, but like a more traditional leading man of that time would have been, would the film have made more money? You do have to, you have to kind of ask that question.
That was of the movie star era.
Yes, and Tom Cruise had many big hits in that time frame. So, yeah.
I mean, the obvious choice
is the same year, or is 2 years prior to Mission Impossible. So, I mean, he was Tom Cruise was still, coming up, as a major force there. Still, he was established in '86, really, with Top Gun. But I mean, he was still a
right.
But I will say this: it would have been a very different film if it's Tom Cruise.
Oh, totally.
It would have been interesting to see him take on that kind of role, because a lot of people would not think he would be a good Hollywood producer, and yet in Tropic Thunder, he's a force of nature in that film. And I'm like,
yeah,
but he's still in that Days of Thunder, like you said, he's in that Days of Thunder, Far and Away.
Well, he's playing. He has the Tom Cruise persona, which is kind of changed a little bit, but is still kind of the same. But it's with his age now. But at that time, he's playing the cocky, confident. I'm for sure the hero.
Which is why it would have been interesting to see him play Norval, because he is not. He is definitely not who you would think of to play that part. It would have been interesting to cast against type and let Tom Cruise really act, because he's a good actor. I mean,
totally. I would like to see him, and I look, he's one of those. He's not as toxic as some other toxic people that are working in Hollywood, but he is one of those people that, like, I just find him compelling on screen.
Yeah.
Like, I just like what he does. He chooses good projects for himself.
Now, man, he's his own visual effect, but yet at the same time, when he works with real directors, I mean, God, look at his work in Magnolia. He's outstanding in that movie. I'm sorry, but he is outstanding in that film.
That's what I would like to see him, like, act again, like him play something against. And I don't know if he'll ever do that again because of, like, all the stuff, but maybe as he's reaching 60, maybe he'll do that again. But who knows?
That man doesn't show any signs of stopping. I'm just saying.
that is the power of Xenu right there.
His thetan levels are so high, he can totally keep doing this stuff.
But you know who they wanted for the Paul Newman role? Was his name Musburger? Or is that his name?
Sid Musburger, yeah.
The Coens wanted Clint Eastwood.
And he couldn't do it. He wasn't able. Which, again, Eastwood would have been great in that role. I mean, he'd have been fantastic in that role. Because you're talking Unforgiven era Clint Eastwood. He'd have been in that part. But, I mean, when you can get Paul Newman, like, you just don't pass go. Don't collect $200.
So
get that man signed up.
I think that's probably what eased Joel Silver's, like, needing a star. He's like, okay, well, we got Paul Newman, which I don't know in the 90s if he's, like, a viable movie star, but he's still a known actor.
He was still very popular because he got an Academy Award nomination, I think, the year after that for Nobody's.
Was it for Nobody's Fool? Yeah.
But he was definitely still getting, he was still a viable name. I mean, people knew who he was. I also like the fact you get a little bit of a Sting reunion with him and Charles Durning in the film together.
Right.
I mean, The Sting is one of the all-time great films. I mean, it's all-time
absolutely great. I wish they had done
that on here sometime, because The Sting is one of those movies that just needs to get rediscovered by so many.
Yeah. I wish they had done a third movie, but I guess Newman died before they could get that movie made that he ended up doing with Nick Nolte, because I think that was originally going to be a Paul Newman Redford vehicle.
I think it was, yeah. And I mean, those two together is just always, I mean, God, there's a magic there, man. You just can't replicate. Those two men together were outstanding. But, digressing from Hudsucker, but, like, when you look at the Hudsucker Proxy, I mean, it's one of those movies that take the title off of it, because the title is just a weird title. But if you look at it on paper, like, that film should have been a hit. I mean, you had top-notch, casting. You had top-notch visual effects artists working on it. Even though it's not a visual effects film, it's chock full of them because of the setting. You had one of the top cinematographers of all time, not just of this time, but of all time. Like, everything on that list. Joel Silver is your producer. Like, everything on that list. Sam Raimi helped write the screenplay. Everything there looks like it should have been a hit. So I can see why Joel Silver takes the chance on it. I really genuinely can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a shame that it didn't pay off like it should have. It's the Coen Brothers films. It's almost like John Carpenter's entire, like, life, basically. Is
right.
Discovered later in life, and then the people who rediscover are like, this is amazing. Why are we not talking about this? And that's why I really appreciate what you guys do with this podcast, because it does bring these films back to life. And these films do deserve to be talked about, to be discussed, to be celebrated. The Hudsucker Proxy.
And I'm catching a lot of these for the first time, which I should have seen already, but just didn't get around to it.
But did you both enjoy watching it last night? Did you find it to be still, like, even though it's almost 30 years old, did you find it to be an entertaining film?
We loved it.
Well, all the films I had to watch yesterday for podcasting, this was the most enjoyable one.
Oh, that's right. We're getting a G.I. Jane later.
And so, but I mean, I'm on the wavelength. I like the Coen's sense of humor. I like, even though I don't think they're conservative people, I like that their, like, sense of moral judgment is like, well, you know what? If you do bad things, bad shit's going to happen to you. Because, I mean,
like you said, this film definitely is a send up on capitalism. I mean,
yeah,
it really is. It's amazing how they can do that without being preachy. It's not like being preachy. It's not beating you over the head. Capitalism's bad. It's just talking about, like, there are bad people in the world of capitalism, and the problem with capitalism is it breeds people like this.
And
the problem.
Watching the mailroom sequence where he's being his orientation, I'm like, how many of us have had a job where they're like, all right, this is what you do, blah 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 blah. All right, here you go.
When he's like, your employee number is like blah 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 blah, and I will only say it one time. If you do not get it, they dock you. Like it's just everything.
Yeah,
like that was the first thing. I was sitting there, like every time he'd say something, I'm like, oh man, that's happening.
So funny.
And then of course, when they're like, let's take a moment of silence for our leader, and then they're like, and you will be docked for that.
Yeah,
it's like. Like, yep.
Like, thank you so much for that. That show of respect. Now get back to work.
Yeah.
I mean,
the
whole blue letter. The blue letter. The guy just storming down the hallway with blue letter. It looks like something out of a Terry Gilliam film at that point. I mean, it looks still. It really does. And he's like, nobody wants to deliver those. Like everybody hates the blue letter, And I love how, we talked about before this recording, we need to go and get into this now. The Deus Ex Machina. The clock and the blue letter. Like it's so funny how that all has payoff. And I love that the man who stops the clock, his name is Moses. You got that. It's so funny that he literally is the ghost in the machine and his name is Moses. Like that's just.
And I love Bill Cobbs in this, even though it has become a stereotypical trope for actors of color to play those type of roles, but he does it so well. And I read somewhere that the fight was added, but the Coen said that was BS. But I love that whole inner workings of the clockwork, which again brings up Terry Gilliam visuals. Which,
and also again the circles, all the cogs and the machine and everything is that circular shape. The other character that we've not talked about, man, I love him to death. My name is Buzz. I got the fuzz. I make the elevator. Like good grief.
Yeah.
That guy is again that spitfire delivery of all of his little jokes about Hudsucker being like splatted out on the pavement. And then when he shows up with his design for the straw.
Right. It's just the circle. Because for a moment I'm like, is he gonna create the coaster? Because I had forgotten that part.
I had forgotten too. And so when I was like, oh, that's right. He makes like a coaster. So then he's like, and I call it like the Buzz Sucker or whatever. He's like, get it? It's a straw. Like it's the bendy straw. Oh my God, just lost it. I just started laughing out loud. I was like, I forgot all about that. And that's so funny. And Buzz, ending up with his girlfriend Jaja, who was played by Anna Nicole Smith. It's just hilarious.
Her first, I believe her first film appearance, but maybe Naked Gun 3 came out before this.
I think
around the same time.
It may have been, but regardless, she's again. If you're in 1994 and you're casting your blonde bombshell, that's exactly who you were going to pick. And it was a great choice. She's hilarious. She has those two little moments she shows up. But like Buzz is a great little character. And again, in any other movie, he's a throwaway character. You see him like one time and that's it. But the Coens I think I would not be surprised if once they got that guy cast, they gave him extra lines because his delivery was so good. Like I wouldn't be shocked to find out that they wrote extra things for him because that guy is so great at playing that 1950s, hey, what are you doing there, guy? Look at you. Look at everybody's buddy. It's just like he's so great in that part. And I mean, really, that little introduction. My name is Buzz. I got the fuzz. I make the elevator do what she does. What a fantastic opening line. And I mean, like, it's so beautifully shot. God, what a great little character. And again, could be a throwaway in anything else. But in this movie, he's a standout. And I love seeing him. Every scene he's in, I love seeing Buzz. He's fantastic.
I love how they incorporate a lot of their regular actors they work with in the tiniest roles. Like you got John Polito as, I guess, some sort of executive waiting for Paul Newman. You got John Goodman as the TV announcer, which I forgotten that. And then maybe Steve Buscemi at his coolest and he actually kind of, like if you had seen just Steve Buscemi in this movie for this little tiny role, like I could see someone like, wow, maybe Steve Buscemi's not weird looking. Like this is like his most conventional looking self he ever was.
He's a beatnik bartender, which makes it
weird.
Hey, Daddy-O. Like it's
I'm like, I'm like, this is like probably the best Steve Buscemi ever looked in his life is in this movie, right?
Might very well be.
Because I'm like, because then they just lean more into his weird looks and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like the only person really missing here is Frances McDormand. Like that's really it. Like I mean, like because God, it is chock full of so many of their go-tos.
I appreciate that about Joel Coen, that even though he has one of the greatest living actors as his spouse, he doesn't automatically put her in every movie.
Which Tim Burton needs to remember that about Helena Bonham Carter.
Well, they're no longer together, so that's probably why she's not.
That might help. Yeah, that'll help. But no, you're right. He does. He has access to that, but he never abuses that power, and only puts her in where he feels like she really needs to be.
And she even says that, like, every time they write a script, she's like, oh, is there a role for me in this one? And she's like, sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. Because sometimes she just pops in for like a second, and then other times they give her like the lead. But, you know, that's cool that what it's more about, does the material fit her instead of like, well, I have this great actor, let me put her in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question. Now, seeing that I've only seen it once, for those of you who have seen it multiple times, is there any connections to Barton Fink? Like any loose connections between like Barton Fink, Hudsucker, and Hail Caesar?
Well,
there was a slight wink and nod, you know, in Hail Caesar.
It's not really those two, but if you guys remember in Raising Arizona, Nicolas Cage's character works for Hudsucker. It's the name of the company. And this was actually the script they had written after Blood Simple, because they met Sam Raimi while Joel was helping editing Evil Dead. And they worked on a script together called Crime Wave, which used to be a really hard movie to find. I think it's actually streaming on IMDb TV right now. Shout Factory did a release. It is not really that great of a movie. They kind of disown it, but it is a great... It also mentions Hudsucker in there, but it is a great sense of showing off Sam Raimi's directing skills and Madcap, what he kind of would do with Evil Dead 2.
Sure.
It's a little, it's not coherent, but what they're trying to do is interesting. And it's definitely a better movie than some of Sam Raimi's other bigger budgeted films he did, because at least there's some personality in the camera.
Yeah.
But so that's where the connections are. And I think another reason why this gets made is because, and Warner Brothers has done this a lot of times it blows up in their face, but they have championed a lot of filmmakers and their visions for films and will give them a decent budget. And I think Silver just wanted to work with the Coen Brothers because he liked their work.
Sure. And when you're Joel Silver, especially early 90s Joel Silver, you can do whatever you want to do, basically, because you've been producing some of the biggest action films of all time. You've earned that right. You know, and Joel Silver, you know, bless his heart, he took chances on things. I mean, I know it's a completely bad film, and I know that it's very much a product of its time, but I will always laugh and enjoy The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Freely admit, it's a funny film. Joel Silver produced it, and he gave Rennie Harlin a chance to direct a bigger budget action film because he saw something in Rennie Harlin and his work that he had done overseas. And he gives him a chance, and he gives him a budget. And granted, the film it tanked, as I think we all knew it was going to happen, but he took a chance, and he took a chance on the film that was not the prototypical action film of its time, did not star the prototypical action star of its time, and did not have a very established, but yet like not well known, I should say, but established director behind the lens. So Silver, to his credit, took chances like that, and I appreciate that. Now, again, I'm not saying that we need to put Adventures of Ford Fairlane on the level of any Coen Brothers film. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying is it's at least nice because you don't see it now that producers took a chance. Because they had enough goodwill established with the studios. They had enough money that they had made for those studios that they could take chances like that. And today in cinema, you just don't see that as much unless you get, like, again, Amazon Prime or Netflix,
well,
HBO or Showtime, man.
Well, look, the last two Coen films and the most recent one wasn't directed by Ethan, just Joel. Went to streamers. Of course,
Yep.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs was originally going to be a TV show, and then it became a movie. But yeah, their last two movies, and they never really made another big budgeted movie. Maybe True Grit, but
True Grit was probably the closest. Yeah, I would say that.
yeah. But they kind of kept it to a smaller budget after this, and I wonder if it maybe because it didn't do well, they're like, well, let's just go back to what we do, like these smaller.
But you also have to look at the fact that I'm sure a lot of the studios were like, yeah, we're not going to give you this massive budget because the last time we did, you guys delivered a movie that made half of its budget, and that's worldwide. So
yeah,
that's going to be, I mean, what thank God did not happen, and what normally would be the case of that is those directors get blacklisted practically because they're seen as poison. Thank God the Coen Brothers had made other well-respected, well-established movies before that, because if not, who knows what we'd have.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, let's say he was getting really funky there. He was looking like he was in a 1980s science fiction film.
Yeah. I totally lost what he was saying about 30 seconds ago.
I think I heard, "Do you think?" That was the last I got.
Yeah.
And I'll say right now, I'm not thinking a whole lot. I've only had a cup of coffee, so I'm just kind of.
No, it's okay. I had a late night as well. I didn't get until 1:32, so I was.
No, I think it's interesting that you guys had never seen this movie. So when you were watching it, like, did it surprise you, like how well it held up?
Oh, it did. Like from the beginning, right at the beginning, I automatically knew what it was. I was getting it, if that makes sense. Like the parallels to industry and the
capitalism in particular. Yeah, man.
Capitalism, the corporate,
that weird
money,
gleeful.
Oh, hi, Lindsay.
Cancerous growth rates, like their margins it's all record profits, and then he just jumps. That's like, I think that's my favorite part of the whole movie is just he sets his watch and he lights a cigar but he sets it down and he just smiles running straight out that window.
Yeah,
and it's the first time.
That's what it feels like we're all doing.
Yeah. It's the only time he smiles, in that scene. He's very aloof looking during the whole, summary of all the money that they've made. In short, we're loaded. And then the only time he smiles is when he jumps out that window, and when he's falling to his death, he's like got a smile on his face. And so we see him as an angel, with that bad halo going on about the top of his head. So.
And isn't that just like an evil corporation or any big corporation? Well, let's just make the stocks go down low so we can just buy it for cheap.
Yeah.
And that cracked me up more than anything was the fact that he had just jumped out the window.
He wasn't even like.
He's not
even cold yet. He's just there on the pavement. And they haven't even picked up his body.
And the one dude's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're talking about this." When our fearless leader just jumped out the window, and he's like, "Cut the crap."
He says, "Stop showboating."
Yeah, stop showboating.
He's dead.
I'm like, holy shit, that's great.
I love that he picks up the cigar and he's like, it's a shame to waste one of these, and just starts smoking.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Paul Newman is perfection in that role. He is. The whole another thing, the other sequence that I love is when they first hire Norville to be the president, and it's just all those scenes of him laughing with all of them laughing, and it's all those different scenes of like getting the suit and they're all just laughing, going to a party, they're all just laughing, and then the final shot of him in his office and they're all just laughing, and then as the doors close, you actually hear him stop laughing, like it's like. That whole sequence, like I was laughing so hard at that. Like I was like, man, just the
was
sheer
that a
evil
metaphor for
joy.
laughing all the way to the bank? Do you
Yeah.
think?
Oh God, it's such a funny moment, man, and it's like, the evil glee going on with all of them in that scene, and him not knowing what's going on. Another shot that I love in the film, and I really forgotten about it, is just the shot when he first gets to town, and there's that big built like that board,
right?
Like it looks like your airline, like all the different flights coming in, departing, but it's just all these jobs. Like the way that the camera starts over top of him, the way it comes down, like that's such an awesome little scene. And again, you could have shot that very basically, and most directors probably would have. It just would have been flat shot, of the board, flat shot of him behind, behind him looking at the board, blah, blah, blah. But they gave even a simple scene like that has so much personality. The words flying up on the screen like those old 1940s and 50s films where like the headlines go flying up, like experience needed, must have 5 years, that kind of. It's such a great little moment. And again, most filmmakers would not give it that panache, but it really is just those little moments like that would have been normal flat shots in the hands of a typical, like in the hands of a less artistic director. That's what you would get.
So still relevant today. The whole
experience. Oh yeah.
The whole experience. Like Leslie said, it makes you laugh so you don't cry about it because it just it's so
nothing
true.
has changed.
Nothing.
It's such a gut punch of reality.
Yeah.
You guys may have not caught this, but it is co-written by Sam Raimi, and he did also, not besides that one sequence, he also shot the whole hula hoop kind of.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. That kid doing the hula hoop is such a good moment, man. Because like the way he looks at it looked like the ape discovering the bone in 2001.
Yeah.
And then when he steps inside of it, like it's just great, man. It's such a great moment.
And isn't that just like kids? Oh, he's got one. I gotta have one.
Oh, when they all are watching him, and then they all just take off, and then you see all the stickers coming off, and then they add the $3.99 on it. Like, oh my god, just great. I mean, like it's just there is so much to love about this movie. There's so many great visual moments, and again, all of it in the service of the storytelling. Like that's the great thing about this movie. Even as big as it is, big budgeted that it is, the big sets, big costumes, big cast. No scene is ever there just to have a scene. Every scene is driving the narrative forward, and it's never boring to watch. Even a simple scene of two people talking is still interesting to look at because of the set, because of the costumes, because of the direction. And it just goes to show that, you can take a simple scene of people talking and you can make it interesting. You can make it dynamic. If you have the right people behind the lens, if you have the right mind behind that scene directing it, you can make, anything can be creative. And there is not one boring shot in that film. There is not one bad looking shot in that film because Roger Deakins got the assignment. He absolutely got the assignment, and he delivers, as he always does, just a gorgeous, gorgeous film. I mean, it is really one of the most beautiful looking films of that time. It really is. Like how it did not get an Academy Award for production design and cinematography, like at least nominated, I don't know.
Right. There's another connection between Hudsucker and Shawshank besides Tim Robbins starring. They came out the same year. They both did not do well commercially. Roger Deakins shot both movies.
Deakins shot both. Yeah, Deakins shot both. And it's so funny because there are those similarities in the two because of the time period, and yet both of them look distinctly different. I mean, they're
totally.
And
it's a crime that they did not do well at the box office.
It is.
It's a crime, but Shawshank has become the ultimate dad movie that's on cable every weekend.
Well, and what's funny is look at its IMDb rating, and I think it was like the #1 rated film of all time. Like it was like number one on the list, and it's
Green Mile are just flawless.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love Frank Darabont. I think he's a phenomenal director, and I think he needs to be doing more stuff. Period. I always love Frank Darabont. And again, Roger Deakins shot the hell out of both of those films. And again, what a year for Tim Robbins and Roger Deakins. Like two of their best works that would both not find their audience until later were developed and released in 1994. And that's so crazy to think about. One of my other favorite films of 94 that does not get enough, absolutely should, is Quiz Show. And again,
Yeah.
you're looking at that 1950s time.
Similar time period, yeah.
Similar kind
Watched
of
that
vibe.
for the first time.
I mean, Quiz Show.
Loved it.
Ray Fiennes in Quiz Show is on a whole other level, man. That movie is Robert Redford directed the hell out of that film. So 94, yeah, what a great year for film. Very much like 82 and very much like 89. 94 was a humongous year in film for the films that were big hits and the films that didn't get their discovery until they should have been discovered, but didn't get it until later. And again, these two movies that we're talking about, Hudsucker and Shawshank, prime examples of that. And I love, the Hudsucker Proxy. I love going back and rewatching it. I found it to be just still as funny, to be just as heartfelt, and to be just fun to watch as it was for me back when I was a senior in high school, watching it, in a theater. It still holds up, and it still does everything it's supposed to do, everything that a good film's supposed to do. It does it well, and it really to me, in the pantheon of Coen Brothers films, this one doesn't get enough love. It needs to be revisited.
A yearly New Year's movie for us.
It's a great pick for a New Year's film. There aren't many of them, but it's a great pick. It's a great pick.
Because I could definitely revisit it yearly.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's always going to be funny, and I hate to say it, it's always going to be timely. I mean, society is what it is. It's always going to be timely.
I think when you make period films, that also helps because it's not set in such a particular where you're like, oh, that's of its time, of its era. And you're talking about it still works today, not just the relevance, but just the comedy and the story. That's just the power of the Coens as storytellers. And you talk about this doesn't fit like their other films they had made up to this point. That's one of the things I love about the Coen Brothers. They're like, well, I'm going to try this kind of movie now. I'm going to try this movie. Like, they're taking their sensibilities and their particular style and putting it into as many genres as they want.
They made their take on an 80s comedy with Raising Arizona. They made their take on a true crime film with Blood Simple. They made their take on a mafia film with Miller's Crossing. It's always their original take on an established kind of film, and this is their take on the 1950s, like the normal man rises up against the big man kind of film, and it's great. I mean, every one of their films. I'll even say this: even if there's a Coen Brothers film that you don't like, I will still tell you that there's something worth watching it for. A performance,
oh, absolutely.
Photography, whatever. There's going to be something that makes it stand out, even if it's not your favorite film. You'll remember it, and that's more than what you can say about most of the films that come out in theaters today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love my comic book movies. I was always a comic book nerd as a kid, and I love the fact that the geek have inherited the earth, and we're getting all these awesome Marvel films. I love them; they're great. But the problem is now it feels like unless your film is an established IP or can be franchised, it's never going to get released, at least not to the level that it should.
They stop taking chances.
Yeah, and the one film this year that I will say, and it's completely unrelated, but I'm just going to put it out there. If you have not seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, that film is why you go to the movies, man. It is.
Yes.
I will never see a film like that again in my lifetime.
I want to see it.
It's so good. It's so visually interesting.
The storytelling is wonderful. The performance.
Yes.
If Michelle Yeoh doesn't get an Oscar nomination, screw the Academy.
Yeah.
Screw the Academy.
Basically.
Doesn't get nominated.
And I'm really glad that and I'm horrible because right now I cannot remember his name, but Short Round.
Oh, Ke Quan. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. He is. This got him back into acting.
And I'll tell you.
Well, you know what?
If you haven't watched his interview on Jimmy Kimmel when he was interviewed for this movie, we need to protect that man at all costs because he is the sweetest, most genuine human being. So grateful and so kind. Like I swear to you, man. Like I just wanted to give that guy the biggest hug. He's just such a wonderful human being and so appreciative of a film that allows people who are of Chinese descent to have an actual real film that touches into their culture, that touches into who they are and is not stereotypical. because he said that's why he quit acting.
Right. Yeah. And he said it wasn't until he saw Crazy Rich Asians
that he got.
He was like, "Oh, maybe I can get good parts again."
Yeah.
Because he did stunt work for the first X-Men movie, and he's actually a martial artist. Like, he knows martial arts.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's
like,
great. And
if you want to pass the torch to Indiana Jones, give it to this man.
Let's short round do it. Come on. I'd be all about it. I'd be all about it. He's so great. And if they get to make that Journey sequel finally,
the Adventures of Short Round would be just kicking.
I'd watch it. Make it a streaming thing on Disney Plus. I'd watch the hell out of it. Not even up for debate. But I'm just saying, when you look at Everything Everywhere All at Once, like that is the kind of film that I am stunned.
Hashtag tweet that.
I was stunned that I was sitting in a theater watching this movie. Like I was like, man, I can't believe this batshit crazy, wonderful thing got released.
I want to watch it so bad. I have a pact with my wife. If it's something we both want to see and we can't see it together in the movie theater, then we wait.
I'm just
it's one of those things.
Connecting it to Sam Raimi. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is a fun movie. It's a really great multiverse take, but I'm going to tell you right now, Everything Everywhere All at Once is the best multiverse movie you're going to get. Like it's wow.
I have no doubt. I'm seeing Doctor Strange tonight. I just want to know one thing, Kevin. Do they let Sam Raimi be Sam Raimi in this movie?
Yeah, it's a Sam Raimi film. I mean, it is. It's
okay. Good, because
it's still a Marvel MCU film, yes, but it is very much in the vibe of a Sam Raimi film. It's got some great jump scares. It's got some great spooky visuals and atmosphere. He was the right person to tap for this film. And, that's one of the things I like about the Hudsucker Proxy is you do see those sparks of Sam Raimi in it. The close-up zoom-in shots on people laughing and, the zoom-in shots like when they're falling, from the skyscraper. Like, you get that Sam Raimi, cartoon energy that he had, in the 80s and 90s. I love that about the Hudsucker Proxy as well. And it's great that we can keep bringing in other things and coming back to Hudsucker because it's, the creativity on display in the Hudsucker Proxy, again, like the creativity we were talking about in Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's so nice when a studio and a producer take a chance on that. And I don't really know what the box office has been for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And a lot of it's going to be the international box office.
Right.
But I hope that film makes tons of bank, especially in the international market, because if it does, then that means we get the chance for more films like that. And God bless A24. They at least are taking chances.
They're trying,
man. They've delivered some of the coolest, weirdest movies of the past 10 years, and we're all better for it. We're all better for it.
I think it's doing well for its budget and how many theaters it's playing in.
5 people on their visual effects staff. 5 people total.
Wow.
Visuals and
that's impressive.
Astounding.
It's as good as anything in a Marvel movie, in my opinion, if not better.
It's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those movies that I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, I just saw this movie, but it might be in my top 10 movies of all time. And I was like, I'm kind of right there with you. Like, I haven't been this exhilarated seeing a movie in the theater since I saw the double whammy in 2019, right before the pandemic, of Ford versus Ferrari and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those films just exhilarated me about cinema again. Like, that's what you're supposed to feel when you come out of a theater. And Everything Everywhere All at Once was just taking me right back to that feeling, even amped up a little bit higher because it's just so crazy and so nuts. But I'm just going to say this, hashtag just be a rock. That's all I'm going to say. Just be a rock. And when you see the film, you know what I'm talking about. It is an absolutely berserk and at the same time gorgeous, beautiful, moving moment.
Absolutely.
Hashtag just be a rock. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring up 2019 because I think it was probably the best movie I've seen in the theater since I walked out of watching Parasite. Like, just
Hey, Parasite. For me, is it worth? Parasite's good. I've heard, right? Is it? We have not seen it yet, and I keep hearing about it. I still don't know what it's about.
Don't find out. Just watch it cold. And it does something I love when movies do it well. It starts out as one type of movie, and then when you get to the second or third act, it's a whole different movie.
It's if you've never watched Audition, it's the same sort of thing there. Audition starts off as one thing, and then it becomes a whole other thing. So yeah, definitely like it's unconventional, which is what I like. But for me, like when you look at big budget filmmaking, like Ford versus Ferrari and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I think is Tarantino's masterpiece. I really do. He had to make every other movie he made before he could make that film. And I can watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood like right now. I can.
Speaking of another actor who I think has done really well of getting older, and he's not quite Newman age yet, but Brad Pitt, man. Yeah, really.
He earned his Oscar. He did.
He's got the chops. He's not just a pretty face. He's a talented guy.
Yeah, and I just, to me, it's nice to see, when you get to go to the movies and you see a film that just exhilarates you, like it just reminds you why you love being a movie geek. It's just like, it's the best feeling in the world. And watching Hudsucker Proxy again last night, I was like, God, yeah, this is why I love the Coens. This is why I loved this movie when I saw it as again, I was a senior in high school. Like, I couldn't appreciate everything going on, but I sure could appreciate a lot. And it's a movie that, again, if you've not seen it in a while, or if you skipped it over because you heard, it's not my favorite Coen Brothers movie, whatever, revisit it, because I think you'll be surprised at how well it holds up and how the message behind it is still very relevant today. And I think you can identify with it. Again, it's a far safer entry into the discovery of the Coen Brothers than almost any of their films. And it's still at the same time a wholly Coen Brothers movie. But I think there's such a charm to it, and such a it doesn't require you to like work really hard to appreciate everything that's there. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to like necessarily like keep your brain turned on the whole time. Like some Coen Brothers films, you kind of do. You gotta watch it closely. This is not like that, but it's not to the point where it's a stupid film where just turn your brain off. Keep it off, because there are some really great little lines, some really great moments, some really great jokes that you'll miss if you don't, because there are some really great things that really do have good payoff there. But it's just such an easy film to watch. And again, not every movie has to like redefine the way we look at drama, or be, the standard setter of how we'll look at film for decades to come. You don't get out of your film critic BS mind, because let's be honest, we're all bullshitting when we're doing film critic. It's our personal take on what we like. It's that simple. No one is completely right on that, except for if you tell me you don't like Jaws, I will punch you in the throat because you're right.
You were uninvited to ever be on this podcast.
But I think you hit a point, because this is one of the few Coen Brothers movies, and people should watch it more than once, but I think this is one that doesn't demand a rewatch, because you kind of get everything
the first time. Yeah, exactly. You get it the first time. Like, Chris and Lindsay, you just watched it for the first time last night, but you got it. You're not going to have to go back and rewatch it today. I missed some subtle.
My rewatch would be just pure pleasure, just because entertainment. Because
and sometimes that's all you need, and that's all a movie needs to be. And this movie fulfills that completely. It really, truly does. If you're looking for just a fun, simple screwball comedy with a little bit of romance, a little bit of drama, a little bit of that Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life kind of vibe to it, look no further, man. This movie hits all those things, and it's still a Coen Brothers film. It's still artistic. It's still, again, gorgeously shot, because Roger Deakins just doesn't know how to fail. And it's just got everything you would want in a Coen Brother film, just at a very nice, just here you go. It's not fast food. Or if it is fast food, it's like Fazoli's. It's not just a burger and fries. It's like pasta and
it's the Chipotle of fast food.
It's not typical fast food. It's got some substance to it, man. And just like the garlic sticks at Fazoli's, you want to revisit it. You want to see more of it. You want to enjoy
never-ending garlic sticks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Like it's there. It's that kind of film. It's not. It's almost a comfort food. I mean, really, it kind of
Yeah.
is. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not every film has to change the world. This is just a fun movie that I can't imagine. Like, take the title out of it, and I think if most people in 1994 would have just went to see this new Coen Brother film, I think they would have actually enjoyed it. I think they would have found it fun, and that's the thing. Like, that's why it still holds up, because it is. It is fun.
Yep.
It is a cute movie, and it still holds up almost 30 years later.
I don't know if you guys heard me because I think I kind of blipped out for a little bit. But another reason why this is maybe one of their most conventionals and maybe a good entry point, it's their only film that's rated PG, too.
That's true. It is. That is absolutely true. It is. Everything else to that point had been rated R, I believe. I think Raising Arizona was PG-13. But yeah. So yeah, this is their only PG film. Much like with David Lynch, The Straight Story is an actual G-rated film. It's a Disney G-rated film. So like, it's this weird thing.
It's just a simple, sweet story, and you're like, David Lynch directed that? Yeah. But it's true. The Hudsucker Proxy. Yeah, it's just fun. It's just a fun movie. Shit, there's nothing wrong with that. Other thing I wanted to bring up is Sam Raimi's actually in this movie. You don't see him. You hear him. He's one of the silhouetted guys trying to come up with the name.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love that scene too, because you never see those guys. And the one's just like, I've got an idea. You got an idea? I got an idea. The hula hoop.
Well, I also love that their secretary is reading like these classically long novels because it's taking that long for them to come up with an idea. Because she's reading Anna Karenina and is it War and Peace? Or
again, it's a visual thing that if you catch it, that's great, and if you don't, that's okay. But it's there, and it's really funny.
Is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we get to rating this movie?
Not really. Like, not for me. Like, it was great. It was a wonderful first watch. I highly recommend it. It'll be a yearly watch for us around New Year's. I decree it right now in our household. But it's a favorite Coen now. I love it. It's up there with Fargo and Lebowski and the other two that I mentioned earlier. I'm having brain farts right now. But anyway, I loved it. And Lindsay, what about you?
I think I'm just going to repeat a point that you already made. I do love that the Coen Brothers make so many different kinds of films. In that, like, as a movie fan, you want to see a bunch of different films.
Yeah.
And most directors just stick to like their style or the only kind of movie they're interested in making. And the Coens take anything that they enjoy and they just make it more enjoyable. I don't think I've come across a Coen Brothers film yet that I was not like 100% down to watch over and over again.
I think even their weaker films, like Kevin said, there's something there. So like I think Intolerable Cruelty and Lady Killers are probably their weakest two films.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly because they came in when those scripts were already in development. Like, those weren't scripts they came up with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there are still elements that make them watchable. It's just not up to snuff when you're looking at the rest of their body of work.
I would agree with that completely. The other thing I'll say about Hudsucker Proxy upon rewatching it, and I'm going to say this, I think that's one of the best looking films of the 90s.
Absolutely.
Like, in terms of production design, cinematography, costumes, sets, that's genuinely one of the best looking films of that decade, man. I will say it, and if I'm a heretic, I'm a heretic, but I'll say it. That's a genuinely handsome film.
What made me miss set design and like movies being shot and then building sets and stuff. I'm like, man, movies used to be so massive and interesting looking.
Earlier, Kevin, you mentioned Corelco Studios. Now, is this the same Corelco that tanked after what's the pirate movie?
Is it Cutthroat Island? Yeah.
Same ones. Same ones.
And I feel bad for that. We're going to do a show on Cutthroat because I absolutely love that movie.
Dude, it's a cool film. It's a cool movie.
I mean, the acting's a little weak, but
not Frank Langella though. Frank Langella, his dog, he owned it.
Oh,
He owned
it's a shame about him though,
dude.
Yeah.
I hate when
recently.
Yeah, but and that's prime Gina Davis. Come on.
Well, I mean, like
dude,
it's prime Gina Davis and prime Rennie Harlan, man.
Yeah.
That was pre-Pirates of the Caribbean for me.
It was.
I absolutely loved it.
Makes you wonder,
soundtrack is kicking.
It makes you wonder if that film would have come out after the first Pirates of the Caribbean, would it have been a bigger success?
Maybe so.
Maybe.
I don't know, but it was.
People weren't ready for it when it came out. They weren't.
Oh, it was great. I remember walking into what was I seeing? I can't remember what film I was going to see, but I was with a buddy. I walked into the lobby, and there is a massive standee right there, and it's just gnarly, like giant skull, and it's got the crossbones, and it's got the ships. It looked like, I wish I could find a picture of it, because it looked like the opening title sequence, if you remember that, like where it looks like an old like pirate map, and it was just, it was epic, and it was right there. Caught me, that hooked me, and I remember seeing it, and I fell in love with it. I was like, hey, where's the toy line now? Like, where's the toy for this? This is,
and what's sad is I genuinely think it wasn't a bigger hit because it starred a woman. Like, I mean, I hate to say it, but the other film that she did with Rennie Harlan that is one of the best films of the 1990s is The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Oh my God, yeah.
It didn't get any love because a woman in an action film. Well, what? No, I can't deal with that. No.
Hey, it's written by Shane Black. Come on, and it's
what made it so badass was the fact that there was a woman. She was a woman captain, and she scalped her father for this map, and she had to fight her uncles, her creepy uncles, for these pieces of this map, for this treasure. And then you've got Matthew Modine, who's who's a con man, more like a Disney character.
Yeah, very much so.
He's, you've got all these. You've got the dude writing the book. You've got, who turns on him. You've got Trotter and the British captain, and it was just, to me, it felt like a sprawling epic. Yeah, like this old school epic pirate movie, swashbuckler.
And it is, you're right. It is a shame that was basically what destroyed Kuroko, when they had so many hits leading up to that, including, Total Recall and then being involved in
T2.
Yeah. I mean, dude, how on earth they could fail, it doesn't seem possible. Because they gave us two of the best science fiction action films, not only of the 90s, but of all time. And yet somehow that's what caused it. But yes, that same Kuroko Studios, they had 5 studio sets there in North Carolina that they built for their sets, and then they did some of the shots were in New York and some were in Chicago, and there were some things like in downtown North Carolina. As a matter of fact, I think if I remember reading up on it, the scene where the kid finds the hula hoop, that was actually shot in North Carolina.
Well, Wilmington is they've shot a lot of movies.
It's a very big. That's where The Crow was shot. I mean, a lot of films were shot there.
Well, and they used New York City as a set piece. Like Ninja Turtles was made there. That they built the New York City set there. Year of the Dragon. Yeah.
So
Manhunter.
It's a cool place and it's neat to see that again. When you have a really good set design, like the Hudsucker Proxy does, it just transports you there, man. And I mean, I'm sure when you're shooting a movie, I'm sure when you're Roger Deakins, like you're so grateful to have a real set like that and not a bunch of green screen or blue screen and figure it out. I think one of the things too, like filmmaking now, it's neat that we do have the ability to do so much digitally. It's cool. Don't get me wrong, but I think it was Lindsay was saying earlier, like there's something about when you're seeing like the real sets and a real place, that there's really people inhabiting that space. It just looks and feels better than anything that you do digitally. And again, I'll defend the Hudsucker Proxy as one of the best looking films of the 90s. It is, to me, anybody who would challenge it, I would just say, did you actually watch it? And if you haven't, go back and watch it, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about. The costume design, again, the sets, Roger Deakins behind the camera, the visual effects team that they had doing all the cityscape shots and all that stuff. Like it is just from beginning to end one of the most beautiful films. It might be, I mean, it has to be in the discussion for the best looking Coen Brothers film for sure. It has to be in the discussion. You may not be your top, but it's going to be in the top 5, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard though because they almost exclusively have worked with
Deakins,
Roger Deakins since Fink.
But keep in mind, this was when Roger Deakins got to work with them with a budget, and that's where I'll just say this: whatever money they had for that film, it's on screen. Like you, absolutely see it on screen. Nothing looks cheap. Nothing looks compromised. Everything looks like I am certain how they wanted it to look, and that's why I think it has to be in the discussion for best looking Coen Brothers film, and again, one of the best looking films of the '90s.
Absolutely. Well, let's rate this film. So for the Coen Brothers rankings, Kevin, this is what I've come up with. So if you love this movie, you think it's great, you think it's a masterpiece, it's a damn fine picture. If you enjoy it, you think it's entertaining, it hits its marks, it does what it's supposed to, it's quirky but delightful. Then, of course, this might fall under this category, but if you think it's for fans or cinephiles only, deep dive. If it doesn't quite hit the mark, it's a little mediocre, then it was a little funny looking, you know? And then if it's bad, it's horrible, which I don't know if the Coens have ever done this, but it just doesn't work. I just went with how you would describe a typical plot of a Coen Brothers movie, and that is a clusterfuck.
Fair.
Well, I'm
Chris,
going.
I'll let you and Lindsay go first, man.
You there, Cody?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, your video's frozen.
Wow.
So, I guess I'll go. I'll go with quirky and delightful. Like I'm not gonna call it the greatest movie of all time. Again, I am such a fan of a lot of their other movies, and it's hard to choose. But this is probably in the top 3 of theirs.
Wow.
3 or 4 of theirs. Okay, top 5. I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's hard to
It's in the
pick
top
favorites
5.
when everything is-
Yeah, it's really hard to choose.
It is hard. It is hard to make a top 5, top 10 Coen Brothers list. And I guarantee you, if we all sat here and did our top 5, it would almost maybe all be 5 different movies. Or we would only have one that we all had in the same top 5.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And that
Lindsay's
might
definitely
possibly be Lebowski, because it's just Lebowski would be there. Anyway, I'm gonna go with quirky and delightful on my end, because yeah, I enjoy it. Good stuff. Lindsay?
Oh, I agree. I was nodding while you were talking,
okay.
so I agree with you.
You're gonna go with
Yeah.
quirky and delightful. So Lindsay and I are both quirky and delightful.
I'm going to say it's a damn fine film that's also quirky and delightful. I think it's a great film. I think it does exactly what they set out to do with it. I think it's a charming film, and I think it's an easy watch. And I think for the film that it is and what they were trying to do with it, it's damn near perfect in its execution, because they got the cast they wanted, they got the sets they wanted, they got the costumes they wanted, they got the look they wanted, they got the feel they wanted, they got the score they wanted, and all of it is just all coming together to create this damn fine film that is full of delightful and quirky moments. So it's not like a 5-star film, but it's like a 4.5 for me, because I do think it's that good. Because again, everything it sets out to do, it does it so well. It's chock full of so many moments that make me laugh out loud. It's chock full of so many moments that make me just go, man, what a gorgeous shot, or what a great scene. It's chock full of characters who I genuinely care about, who I want to see on screen. I want to hear them talk. I want them to share that wonderful, quick, whip-smart dialogue. It's the whole Muncie thing. There's so many great little moments in this movie that are just wonderful. a cast where every single role is perfectly cast. There is no one better for any one of those parts in 1994. There is no one better for any one of those parts. Again, maybe one of the best looking films of the 1990s, definitely one of the best looking films of that year. And for a Coen Brothers film, I'm going to agree with Chris and Lindsay. It's a top 5 for me. It might even be a top 3 actually, just because it is so easy to just sit down on the couch, pull it up, and just watch. It's such a fun, simple little story. Very Frank Capra. And again, from a visual side, very Terry Gilliam, and I adore Terry Gilliam, so that automatically gets major points. So for me, yeah, it's right there in between, and for me, it's a top tier Coen Brothers film. If you've not watched it in a while, go back and watch it. If you've never watched it before, take a chance. It's under 2 hours. I guarantee you'll find something to enjoy in the span of that time.
I'm gonna go quirky and delightful, but not because I do enjoy this movie thoroughly. I think I liked it more this time than I watched it the first time, but I still enjoyed it the first time. It's just so hard for me because almost every single one of their films is top tier. Like, because they're just so good at what they do. Like, they just knock it out of the park almost 9 out of 10 times. Like, it's top notch. But I do love the Preston Sturges humor meets the Frank Capra-esque plot with sweetness. Like, this really is this is really, I'm going to say it is their most conventional movie, because even Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and Raising Arizona has more quirks in it.
Yes. Absolutely.
And True Grit, if you don't like Westerns, you're not going to like that movie. Like, this is appropriate for anybody. And it's such a sweet and fun movie. I love the dialogue, the rat-a-tat-tat back and forth. And I love that they just got to make this movie. Even if it wasn't successful, they got it made. It was their movie from beginning to end. And it's just another shining example of the Coens just blending their sensibility into the type of movies they like Lindsay said. Like, they just bring their style into the type of movies they want to make. And they try everything. Yeah. And hats off to them.
I think we can also say that this is the one Coen Brothers film that could be, for kids.
Exactly. It is. I don't know if kids would like it, but it's appropriate for them to watch.
I think there are some things that kids could find very funny. There is some very big, humor, like the physical humor. The scene with the fire and the trash can, I would guarantee my son would.
Oh, that's pretty humorous. And then the plexiglass scene.
Yeah. Oh, my son would die laughing at that. He would lose it.
Yeah, there's some great gags. Well, Kevin, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks for elevating a movie that I think, not so much with Blade Runner, but with Blade 2, you're kind of bringing to light a movie that I think gets kind of lower down on a director's list because of their body of work, but still deserves to be in the discussion as one of their better movies.
Yeah, I again, when you put up the list of films, I may have been the only person that jumped on the Hudsucker Proxy, but I remember distinctly seeing, and I was like, I have to jump on that one because it's a film that it has never left my mind. I still say, for kids all the time, and I still laugh out loud like a madman thinking about that blueprint for the hula hoop. Like, it is those, and I saw that movie in the theater in '94, and I don't know that I saw it again. Like, I really don't remember seeing it a second time until last night. And those things have stuck with me all that time. That says something, man. For a movie that I saw one time in the theater, that I remembered those things that much, that they still make me laugh to this day. As a senior in high school, and now, as a 46-year-old dad, like, it still makes me laugh. I was like, that there's something special about this movie. And I'm glad that you guys are doing these series where we can take a look at all of the films in someone's repertoire, because there are going to be hits and there are going to be misses. Sure, nobody fires exactly, nobody bats 1,000 their entire career. Not even the very best of directors. Even Hitchcock has films that I think are okay, but when they deliver on a scale that few will ever accomplish, and they deliver something that changes the way we look at the form in some way. And the Coens, what I've always loved is, like we talked about, take your conventional tropes, but man, they put it on its ear and they make it feel fresh and original and new again. And when you can do that, and when you can do that by paying homage to the films of the 1940s and 50s, as they did with the Hudsucker Proxy, that's filmmaking on a level that few will accomplish, man. And it's just, it goes to show that if you have directors with a vision and you give them the tools that they need and just get out of their way, when you do that, you get great art. And even if that art is a little more pop friendly, it's a little more mainstream, it's still art. You can't look at the Hudsucker Proxy and tell me it's not an artistic film. You're just you're completely wrong if you say that. Yes, its storytelling is conventional. It's a conventional story, but it's not just a simple conventional film. If you look at the films of that era, it definitely stands out as better than most if you go back and look at it. And it's a shame that it didn't find its audience then, but I'm really thrilled that it's been finding it since, and I'm thrilled to be a part of something like this, like you guys do, and God bless you for doing it, where people get a chance to rediscover these things and maybe give something a chance that they've never given before or had just forgotten about and just needed to kind of rewatch it. Right. Keeping those kinds of films alive, man. I mean, it's easy to talk about the big classics. It's easy to talk about those like we did for Blade Runner for 3 hours. But it's these kinds of films, the ones that got overshadowed by the greatness of other films by that same director, or the greatness of other films that came out that year, or just fell victim to just bad timing, bad press, or whatever. It's nice to be able to revisit these films and give them that life, man. So as always, thank you so much for the time and for allowing me to be a part of your discussion. As a film geek, it's a real pleasure to get to see these things and to get to be a part of it. Thank you guys for doing what you do and for allowing me to be a small part.
Yeah, always, man. It's always a pleasure to have you on and to hear your opinion, because that's what we're all about. And yeah, we always love having you on. Speaking of, on the 19th, which is a Thursday of this month, it will have been 1 year since we started the weekly show.
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Yes, and that was for Nothing But Trouble.
Yes.
So
yes.
Happy almost 1 year weekly show anniversary, guys.
Well, that's awesome, and kudos to you guys for doing that, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of the discussion on Nothing But Trouble. I had so much fun talking about that, and again,
and while I have you on here, you showed interest in doing Last Starfighter.
Oh yes.
So while I've got you, when would you want to do that? You tell me.
Usually the weekends are fine for me, like a Wednesday or I'm sorry, Friday or Saturday. During the week, I can usually even find a way to make it work. But Fridays and Saturdays are pretty easy for me. With the exception of like the next 2 weekends, I've got events for work that I have to be either out of town on Friday or doing something on Saturday. Right. Outside of that, I'm pretty free. But goodness gracious, would I be excited to talk about that film? If you haven't got the new Arrow Video 2-disc set, the 4K restoration of it.
Oh,
goodness gracious. It's great. And I have worshipped that film since I saw it in a small little theater in St. Albans, West Virginia in 1984. It is, yes, just I'll go ahead and put a ring on it. I do. Let's find a time and let's make that work.
Can I just take?
But go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to take a second to say Arrow Video, great company.
Yes.
I believe they're a British company. They're basically the Criterion for weird cult movies for the most part. But Barnes & Noble's always has a sale at the same time they do the Criterion. So maybe if you pick up a Criterion, also pick up an Arrow Video disc. It's so hard though, but...
I have the Arrow videos for Dune, the original David Lynch film, which is a stunning box set. That is, I mean, really gorgeous. I have Last Starfighter, Crimes of Passion, which we need to talk about on this channel. If you've never seen that, that's Ken Russell at his sleazy 80s finest. Anthony Perkins as a serial killer that has a, let's just say a a protruding toy with a blade.
Oh,
Dude, it's nuts. And Kathleen Turner as a high-priced hooker. It's if you've never seen Crimes of Passion, you need to watch it, and we need to talk about it because Jesus H, what a film! But that transfer is stunning. It is an absolutely stunning transfer. And then I have that Last Starfighter from Arrow Video, which is fantastic. And they just released, and it's already in my cart, True Romance. So,
my God, I love that movie.
God, I adore True Romance. It's a brilliant film, and it looks like
Might be the best thing Tarantino ever wrote.
And they actually brought back his commentary from the original DVD, which is the only commentary Tarantino has ever done for a film.
Wow.
He has never done a commentary for his own movies, but he did for True Romance, and he actually really loved what Tony Scott did with the film. His original ending had Clarence getting killed, but then when they kind of looked at it, he was like, when I see what they did at the end, he's like, you know what? I get it, and I'm totally fine with it. Like, he never really had any heartbreak about them keeping him alive and giving it a little more of a happy ending. Oh, such a great film. But yeah, Arrow Video, if you're not paying attention to their stuff, man, jump on it. As you said, rightfully so. They are the criterion of like pop cultural oddities, and I love them for it.
Nice. Yeah, I'll check that out.
Well, thank you so much. It was half the time of Blade Runner. We were in rapid dialogue speed of the movie, I guess.
Well, there were so many digressions and tangents that we went on. I mean,
it's true.
We brought Cutthroat Island into the discussion, man. Come on.
You were talking about hits and misses. Cody, G.I. Jane, White Squall, is that today?
That is today, this afternoon at 2 p.m. So we'll be talking that because we've been trying to get that episode out, so we got to get it out.
All right.
Those are two. I mean, they're lower on the totem pole for Scott, but I mean, you can't deny they're gorgeous films. Like, they're beautifully shot. Ridley Scott knows how to shoot a movie.
Yeah.
White Squall, I'd put a little bit above G.I. Jane, but they're both, they're serviceable films. They're okay.
They're fine.
They're not Blade Runner or Legend or Black.
White Squall, like Cody put it, is very much a dad movie.
That's a great
enjoy
it. To be your dad.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's not the greatest. It is better than 1492.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, what I did yesterday in the bathroom's better than 1492, other than its visual look.
God, it is a stunning looking film. Can't deny that.
And G.I. Jane, I have issues with, but we'll get into that at 2:00, Cody.
Yes.
We'll get a whole other. That's a whole other soapbox right there, baby.
Speaking of Ridley Scott, Kevin will return to talk. I think one of Scott's better films maybe gets kind of lost in the shuffle because of his 3 or 4 big movies. Black Hawk Down.
Yes, I'm stoked to talk about that film. That is, man, what a great war film. In the pantheon of war films, that film is outstanding. And again, visually and the editing by Pietro Scalia is just mind-blowing. That film is a top-tier film. I thoroughly believe it needs more discussion than it gets, so I'm thrilled to be able to talk it up because, man, that movie, when I saw it in the theater, it blew me through the back. I mean, it really did. What an intense and thought-provoking war film. Very, very well done.
And then for our weekend brunch show, we're still doing Star Wars this month. We're doing the standalone Star Wars films this week, Rogue One and Solo.
Yes.
So.
Unpopular opinion, I think Solo is the better film. Rogue One looks great,
but
I don't like Rogue One as much because it ruined everything in the trailers, and the characters have like no development whatsoever. You absolutely know the outcome before it even happens, and in the end, it's like when I came out of the theater, the first thing I said was, "Name me any character from that movie."
What's the Alan Tudyk robot? KS-09?
No. It's K2SO.
That's
K2SO.
But like, seriously, do you remember like any of the characters other than big dude with machine gun and the guy who wants to be a Jedi but has a crossbow and is blind, the dude who gets tentacle raped by the hentai thing, and the Forrest Whitaker with a ventilator? Like, it's so non-connected to those characters. It's just visual. and I just didn't care for it. Whereas
To be
Solo,
honest, I really was in it for the old school. Like I love the
it looks great. It looks great,
was amazing. Even Darth Vader's hallway scene, I got giddy over. I thought that was visually great and awesome. And
but I felt no connection to any character.
Then, like right after that, he fights Obi-Wan, and it's like,
yeah, that's my problem with the whole Vader thing. It's like, yeah, it's a cool scene, but it makes no sense physically from anything we've seen him do in the original trilogy. And also, it's like, again, I have no connection to any character in that movie, so it just feels very much like all, it's all sound and fury signifying nothing when it's all said and done.
Those are valid points, and I get that.
But Solo, to me, at least felt like a 1970 Star Wars film. It had like the swagger and charm. It didn't need lightsabers. It didn't need the Force. It just was a fun, like heist film. And I will
give it that. We rewatched it after it's been probably a year, and this time around, it really struck. It hit me different. I was like, man, this. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it when I did see it. It's just this time around, I enjoyed it more. I think.
Yeah, I think it holds up better on reviews than Rogue One. I liked Rogue One when I came out of the theater. I was like, oh, it's so crazy and intense. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, who was what now? Like, I'm the kid who knew who all the Star Wars characters were coming out of the theater, growing up with the original trilogy. But with this, I'm like, I just had no connection to it. It's beautiful, but who did I care about? Who did I latch onto? No one other than K2SO. That's literally it. I felt more connection to the droid than I did any human on that team.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
Well, I'm going to call it my internet is acting weird, but thanks, Kevin, for being on the show.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.
Cody, see you.
Bye.
And see everyone else.
Yep.
For the weekly show tomorrow.
Oh, next weekend we're doing Fargo, guys. So
good stuff.
There you go. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't seen this movie, check it out. It's just as good as any other Coen Brother movie.
Good deal.